Everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Congresswoman Lori Trahan, and I'm so grateful to be joined today by an incredible panel for a discussion that is so critically important for us to have in our communities, and it's about domestic violence. As you know, or as you may know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which provides us with an unbelievable opportunity to elevate this issue. Unfortunately, too many may not realize just how prevalent a problem this is in almost every community, both here in Massachusetts and across our country. More than 10 million women and men are physically abused by a spouse or an intimate partner in our country each year. That equates to an average of almost 20 people per minute who are victimized by domestic violence. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience a form of domestic violence, including severe intimate partner physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking that can cause physical injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, and so much more. Also, domestic violence can be fatal. In fact, nearly 1 in every 5 cases of domestic violence includes a weapon of some sort, and when a gun is present, the risk of homicide increases by 500%. I want to be clear on this. Domestic violence has been an epidemic in our country for a very long time. And with necessary restrictions to slow the spread of COVID-19 over the past 7 months, it's only getting worse. The National Domestic Violence Hotline has seen nearly a 10% increase in calls. And many contacts have reported that COVID-19 has impacted their situation. Preventing domestic violence and providing resources and relief to victims of DV require strong partnerships and a unified commitment across all levels of government and private organizations, including the ones we have represented here today, the Center for Hope and Healing, Alternative House, and the Live for Live Foundation. It's no secret. Right now, the federal government is failing to do its part in this partnership. The Violence Against Women Act of 1994, also known as VAWA, ushered in transformative progress by calling for the protection of all Americans from violence and abuse, while also working to ensure that survivors had access to life-saving services and, of course, justice for the crimes committed against them. Congress has updated and reauthorized VAWA 4 times since its passage more than 25 years ago, but it expired early last year despite our best efforts in the House to extend the vital protections in this legislation. Last April, I voted to pass an updated version of VAWA that authorized $1 billion in federal funding over the next 5 years for services for victims and programs, and also contained long overdue updates to this legislation, including better services for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And for the first time, we included language in the legislation that's specifically designed to help young and LGBTQ victims of violence. We expanded housing protections for survivors who are doing everything that they can to escape an abusive household, but who may have nowhere else to turn. And we also included provisions to close the boyfriend loophole. This long overdue provision prevents those convicted of abuse or stalking from buying firearms. Make no mistakes, this provision will save lives. The legislation passed the House with strong bipartisan support, but the Senate has refused to take it up, at least in part because the gun lobby opposes closing the boyfriend loophole. As frustrating as this is, we've managed to continue funding VAWA programs through the budget process. That way we can at least continue providing these critical services under the now expired version of the legislation. But this is just a Band-Aid approach to a very serious problem, and getting an updated version of VAWA signed into law remains a top priority. In the meantime, I wanted to hold this Facebook Live conversation because it's so important that viewers tuning in, especially those who know someone who is a victim of DV or is perhaps a victim, him or herself, are aware of the resources that are available in our community. It's why I'm so glad to be joined by three truly outstanding guests who have committed themselves to providing these critical services to victims and potential victims of domestic violence. So if you tuned in to some of our Facebook Live discussions before, you may recognize our first guest, the great Isa Walda-Georges. Isa has been the executive director of the Center for Hope and Healing for more than 7 years, where she has spearheaded programs that serve victims of sexual assault and raise awareness to eradicate sexual violence in the greater Lowell area. She previously worked at the Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence, otherwise known as Jane Doe Inc., and at the Department of Social Services, now known as the Department of Children and Families. Isa is just unbelievably respected, and she is a national trainer in the field of domestic and sexual violence and child abuse, race and inequality. She's also very well known for her dynamic training style and her teaching skills on these topics, as well as for her activism in addressing racial disparities. So Isa, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing. It's great to have you back for this important discussion, and I look forward to that. Let me introduce my other guests. Erin Casey, who currently serves as the coordinator of community engagement and survivor services for Alternative House, which is a Lowell-based nonprofit seeking to put an end to domestic violence by offering domestic violence victims and their children access to shelter, support, children's programming, legal, housing, and community advocacy. She's a graduate of Framingham State University. Erin conducts research outreach to the community and coordinates staff training and provides direct support to our DV survivors. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me. And I just quickly want to express admiration for all of you in this position. In the last year, I've really been able to bear witness to how you all show up for your community and specifically for survivors. And I've learned so much. So thank you for having me.
You bet, you bet. We're so grateful for all you and everyone at Alternative House does for our community. And last but certainly not least, our final guest is Jodi Marchand, a survivor of domestic and gun violence. Jodi has spent the last decade raising awareness and speaking out against all forms of domestic violence. She co-founded the Live for Live Foundation after her own daughter, Olivia's life was tragically taken at the hands of her own father. Jodi's mission and the mission of her foundation is to educate, raise awareness, and offer help and support to victims of domestic abuse and violence. You know, my family has run in her annual run to help build awareness, but I think most importantly, Jodi has shown enormous courage and unending dedication to the fight against domestic and gun violence, as exhibited through her foundation, her fundraising, and her willingness to speak publicly about her own experience. So I'm so grateful that you could be part of this afternoon's discussion. It's great to see you again, Jodi.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be part of it. It's just so important to, talk about what goes on in our society each and every day.
So I thought maybe before we kick it off, I remember the first time, Jodi, I heard your story. And, for those of our viewers who might not know, it provides so much, information on what folks can do. So if you wouldn't mind just starting with your story, how it's impacted you, and what Live for Live is all about.
Well, you can cut me off when you're ready, because that story could be on forever. But basically, I met someone when I was 19 years old. He was 28. He swept me off my feet because, all of a sudden at 19, I'm going out to dinner to this fancy places and, meeting all his fun friends. And but you next thing you know, it started with emotional abuse, control, power. That's what we say. There's so many signs. So when I speak to some kids at the Western Academy, talk about, being, when your boyfriend or girlfriend is texting you, 20 times in 20 minutes. Where are you? Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you with? It's control. And so for years, that's what I put up with. You're only allowed to do so much. Shopping meant, buying something and hiding it and taking the tag off. And so what it boiled down to is he knew he was losing control after, 30 years. And I got home one night and he started yelling at me and choking me, which is one of the, final steps. And the next thing you know, my daughter walked in and I said, we got to get out of here. And we went upstairs and I was changing out of my pajamas, biggest regret ever. Came up with a gun, a Glock, and shot my daughter and killed her. And I turned to go towards her. And I was shot in the head and the bullet entered my left temple, shattering my jaw, and now sits in my right shoulder. So I say he got the last bit of control. I forever live with the loss of my child, and pain in my jaw that's unbearable. But, so after it happened, little by little, I've been out there because I think I try so hard to get into schools. I was 19, but I feel it's important to talk about it. And Live for Live is currently raising money so that we can someday help, women, number one, by helping them with maybe last month security deposits so they can get out of a bad situation, because that's kind of where I was afraid. And also hopefully soon have some sort of transitional housing so that we may be able to train them for a job, or very often they have a job and they need that money to get into a place, and that's what our goal is.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing your story. As a mom, it's heartbreaking to hear it. But it is so important because when you talk about the control preceding, the violence, I think it's really important that young people understand those signs, even when they're in just what might seem like a casual relationship. And I know that hearing, your story, it's just all too familiar to those who have, lost a loved one to domestic violence. So one, I know I speak for so many when I say how grateful we are that you share your story. But I also think it's incredibly important that we give folks who are tuning in the opportunity to hear about the different forms of domestic violence and abuse and how they can spot those signs. So I am going to just turn it over to each of you, since you're the experts, and just talk a little bit about that and maybe what services your organizations offer to assist victims and their loved ones. And so, Isa, maybe you go first in this.
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is such an important discussion. And Jodi, as always, thank you again for your gift of your daughter and sharing your personal story. Inspiring and motivating. Thank you. The Center for Hope and Healing has been at it in Lowell for over 40 years, right? Trying to eradicate sexual violence and support our community. I do want to say, in terms of power and control, that is one thing that sexual assault and domestic violence share in common. Sometimes when people think about sexual assault, they think about sex. When the reality is it has very little, if nothing, to do with sex. It really is about dehumanization, power, and control. It happens more often than not, unfortunately, in relationships where people are known to one another, where the perpetrator is known. So it's an intimate relationship, a dating relationship, a partner, a spouse. So that's important to know. And the other thing to know about CHH is that, before I even go there, Congresswoman, thank you. Keep at it. We need VAWA. We need all the protections that you're wanting to include in the next bill. It is so, so important.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah, that's very much because what we're finding right now and how folks are describing our challenges are that they're describing it as a pandemic within a pandemic,
Oh, absolutely. I've heard that over
right?
and over. But describe to our viewers what that means.
I think that means that existing challenges, existing inequities, existing, things that social determinants of health tell us are challenges, poverty, homelessness, joblessness, are double down for survivors right now. And they find themselves in a catch-22. I can't leave, I don't have a job, and I'm maybe forced to stay with someone who's abusive or be homeless. And that is even not safe right now, given COVID-19. So we're getting calls on a daily basis for housing, for food, for shelter. It's really, really challenging in a community like Lowell specifically that really is struggling with the impact of coronavirus. And so I don't know, Erin, if that's what you all are seeing as well. I want to make some space for you.
And I'm over here just nodding away because everything you're saying is just so exactly what we're experiencing here with working with survivors. And as Jodi was talking about the hopes for Live and offering those security deposits, we see that on average, it's 7 attempts for someone to successfully leave an abusive relationship. And so much of that is tied into financial abuse and not necessarily having control over your own money and assets. And in this time of uncertainty and with fear of COVID as well, that's another factor that can deter someone from seeking shelter, that fear of contracting the virus and potentially putting your children at risk. So yeah, and also with the way that we are adjusting in daily life and how a lot of court processes are being done remotely, it also leaves a lot of questions when it comes to emergency restraining orders. There are survivors that call us and just don't know what move to take. And so that's a service we provide through our 24/7 crisis hotline, legal advocacy, just walking you through the steps and just letting you know that there's options for you. And that's definitely part of our work is if we're not able to provide that housing or food assistance, we are going to refer you to someplace that can. This work is so collaborative.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Issa, you were going to tell us a little bit about Center for Hope and Healing and, sort of how you maybe get referrals, how you sort of intervene, what kind of services those are. I think there are probably so many folks who don't know where to go, like you said. Right now there is a pandemic within a pandemic. And so you can just imagine how overwhelmed victims of domestic violence are feeling right now, just like that they can't even get out from underneath, and they're putting their own problems, second to maybe protecting their children or, staying in a home. And so I guess my question is two-part. One, I want to come back to Issa so that you can kind of tell us about Center for Hope and Healing, or tell our viewers about Center for Hope and Healing. And then also give some guidance to folks on, what they can do. What's that first next step that they can do that will help put them on a path to, a healthy, a healthy path.
Sure. Thank you. So the Center for Hope and Healing, really is a comprehensive organization that's grounded in social justice, that is a multicultural organization. Our staff speak multiple languages, represent the various communities that exist in Lowell, which is so important because many of the folks who come to us, right, their first language is in English. Their first culture is not this culture. Their birthplace is is not here. So in terms of understanding and navigating systems, so much of what we do is advocacy. Yeah. We do one-on-one counseling. We do support groups. We do web-based services. We have a web-based chat right now. We do 24/7 hotline. So all of those are core components. Folks can reach us anytime. And soon we're so excited to be launching a new mobile outreach program. We're going to be doing a van that actually is going out into communities, reaching people where they are, because isolation is such a real and dangerous thing. So that's a piece of what we do. We also do LGBTQ and T youth work and support, and we have a engaging men and boys program, because we know not all men are abusers, but men are an important part of the solution to be role models and to be leaders, right, in healthy masculinity. So that's a piece of what we do in terms of prevention and intervention. And where to start? The first thing I want to say to anyone struggling with violence or a loved one is to really start with breaking the isolation. An experience of violence is the most isolating thing you can experience. First you think, well, this is me, I'm crazy, I'm bad, I've done something wrong, this is only happening to me. So you can imagine pandemic within a pandemic, right? So now I'm thinking that, and I can't go out and tell anyone, I can't go out and really even get help. So there's so many things you could do for friends and family and loved ones. Drive by, drop off some food you cooked, call someone on the phone and check in, have a Zoom chat. Now is the time for all of us as community members, providers, loved ones, to send a strong message to survivors. We see you and we're still here for you. We haven't forgotten you.
Such important reminders. Jodi, I saw your head nodding that entire time as Isa was talking. What do you want to share on that?
Well, I mean, everything she's stating, it's just, it's so mind-blowing to me that it goes on, the number of people it goes with. I will say, I was just with someone recently who had went through a bad situation. She got out and she's with her parents, and she wanted help because she had a restraining order, or she had to extend it, I believe. So I talked to someone at Alternative House, because yes, I can help someone that's in a current situation, but my husband killed himself. So I didn't have to go through a restraining order and all the steps that need to be taken. So fortunately, there are resources out there, and thank goodness for that. Because think how part of the fear is trying to get to court, and how do you do it when someone's home with coronavirus? And also, I think very often someone doesn't believe they're in it. They don't see it. As Isa said, you think you're crazy. They make you feel like that. And that's why talking about it is so important. And when I speak, I always say it's you or your family member or your best friend. And these are the signs. It's not just hitting. But look what happens when the person knows that they are losing control. They're not going to have it.
Yeah. And so, one of the things, Erin, though, I think I've known Alternative House for a long, long time. In fact, when I was a staffer for the congressional office before I became the representative, we shared space, or shared a floor with Alternative House. And then, I was just meeting with Kathy Kelly and the chief of police. And so, it's clear that there is a tight relationship when, there are 911 calls and, there's an episode of domestic violence, that Alternative House has long worked with the police department to get the support and the services that, victims need. Because I think, as we're all in our homes, right, as we're all sort of retreating into those walls, whether it's remote learning, or there's a lot that happens in those walls that aren't healthy for, families, and they relied on school and work to kind of get out. And so I guess one of the things that I want, Isa gave some great examples of like, what can you do to sort of penetrate those walls? You can drop by, if you can drop by your neighbors, you can do a Zoom call, you can check in, and especially if you're worried about a friend or neighbor. Maybe speak to some of the ways you've been able to intervene. I know sometimes it's reactive, but I'm sure it's proactive in other ways as well.
Yeah, and also circling back to guidance on where to even start. At Alternative House, as advocates, we recognize that when someone calls our hotline, it may be the first time they ever are sharing their story and experience. And considering the stigma of domestic violence, we understand the power of just empathically listening and validating someone's experience. And from there, another service we provide through our hotline is safety planning. And this is something we can also do with concerned family and friends. It's a way to work with that person and understand what's working for them in harm reduction, what's working with them to keep them safe, and really empowering them that they have the tools and that we are here to support them from behind and offer guidance and referrals, and just understanding the power and the strength it takes to ask for help and to be vulnerable about your situation. So also with our hotline, we're also here to listen for emotional support. You don't have to call with the intention of needing to take legal action or a step. Sometimes you just need someone to hear you out, and we're here to just be someone to listen to.
Oh, that's great. And, I do see so much collaboration between organizations. When I guess the last time, Jodi, I saw you were with Moms Demand Action, and you were talking about the importance of ending gun violence, and you were telling your story there. And then there's obviously COVID-19 has just changed. I'm sure you've had to change your methods of outreach to reach all those, community by community, culture by culture, make sure folks know that help is there. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to what folks can do. I mean, this is what kind of is going through my mind. We're in election season. People are off the sidelines in droves. It is such a great thing for all of us to see. I think women are in part, leading that charge. It started, a few years ago, and it's continuing. But there are so many other ways that we can be helpful on a community level once the election is all over. And, people really just want to use their activism and their energy in a place that's, and so what do you say to folks who are, maybe watching this, who don't necessarily aren't a victim, but they want to help. They want to help in their community. They want to help organizations like yours.
Who's that? Is that directed to me or?
All of you. And I'm sorry, I'm really bad at. I'm not great at the moderating part.
So I'll just toss in a few things. And actually, during this time, it has been an incredibly moving thing to watch the mutual aid happening in Lowell, to watch organizations coming together, schools, Boys and Girls Club, youth serving organizations, all giving out food, being there, resources for communities. Jodi said it earlier, economic independence, right, is the primary factor to move folks towards safety and well-being. If you don't have the resources, it's going to be really nearly impossible to get out of a dangerous situation. So there's plenty of organizations, especially in Lowell, that are collaborating to needed resources to children and families. You can't think about safety from violence if you're hungry, or if your children are hungry, or if you're going to be evicted tomorrow. So those basic needs, join any mutual aid group in Lowell that is giving out food, that is supporting children and families right now. That's why I would say is a place to start. Of course, after voting, locally and nationally.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What else, Erin and Jodi? Erin first.
Yeah. Definitely finding ways that you can get involved and support the work of the people that, are on the front line and doing this work. And even in a way that's even simpler than that within yourself is you being an advocate in your own life and, you know, speaking up against domestic violence when you witness it, or even the way you contribute to rape culture, or how you talk about these things, how you work to end the stigma within yourself and within your circle. And although it's so important to, get involved and donate your time and resource, but it's also important to within yourself. There's a lot you can do, even if it feels like it's not on a large scale. It's important.
I'm,
Bring us home, Jodi.
I'm sorry. I am part of Moms Demand Action, and because for me, my husband was a hunter, so there were guns in the house, so it was not unusual. And what the gun he used though was not a hunting rifle; it was a Glock. He had asked for it for Christmas, and because he hunted, I didn't really think that much about it, so I actually bought the gun he asked for that murdered my child. So I'm telling you, awareness is everything. Awareness of the signs of abuse, awareness about gun safety. It's got to get out there more and more. And and can I say this? When there were times I went to leave and economic was it. I would look at places that, I have a child, and I needed first last month, whatever the security deposit. I didn't, and then, but I think if someone said, here's this money.
Yeah.
Here you go. If I had woken up in the next day with the relief I would have felt, I would have worked 3 jobs. And so this is one part that we can help with, and every bit helps. And like I said, the resources are out there. Thank goodness for ISA and for Alternative House. It's got to be talked about.
Well, and to you, Jodi, right? I know I've seen you in so many places, sharing your story and spreading awareness and making sure that people understand the signs and that they don't fall into, the traps of ever believing that it's okay, that this control is actually going to lead to something good. So, you all deserve just unbelievable credit. I mean, I don't think people realize you all choose to commit your lives to helping victims. And it is just the nobility in that is tremendous. And so I not only want to thank you for spending time with me today, but also, how you spend your time is just, it's quite admirable. So thank you for doing that. And, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I think it goes without saying that if you or someone is a victim of domestic violence or abuse, and you think one of these incredible organizations can be of assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact them. We've included links to their websites in the comments section, so all you have to do is click for more information. So finally, if you've tuned into any of our conversations on Facebook lately, you've heard me with my mom moment at the end of the call, where we just impress upon you the importance of not thinking we've turned a corner on COVID-19. We're about to have that same small talk again right now. We are seeing spikes in COVID cases in communities across Massachusetts. Nearly 80 cities and towns are currently characterized as red because of the high level of transmission going on. And we did such a great job getting this virus under control earlier this year, and that was due in large part to all of you helping out our essential workers, our courageous frontliners, by doing your part. And so we have to do that again. We have to re-energize that effort. So please continue following the guidance from our public health experts. Keep washing your hands frequently, maintaining a safe social distance, and wearing that mask. We know that those simple acts work. Experts predict that flu season is going to be tough, so get a flu shot. All of these steps will go to ensure that our frontline and our essential workers are able to do their jobs as safely as possible. And I just once again, thank you for taking the time. Take some of the advice that we learned today and, you know, enact it in your own daily lives. Check in on folks, check in on your neighbors and your community. Make sure you stay safe, stay healthy. And if you haven't already, make sure you go out and vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.